I am Helen Collins, a 29-year-old who works at the local library in an obscure small town. My life is characterized by simplicity, perhaps too simple for some, but it is uniquely mine. Being the quiet type, I've always found solace in the company of books rather than the clamor of the outside world. The library, an old and cozy building with creaky floors and weathered shelves, is my sanctuary. Despite its imperfections, it is perfect to me. Each day at 8 o'clock a.m., I open the library doors, turn on the lights, and savor the familiar scent of books. This routine, although repetitive, never loses its charm. My parents passed away when I was young, leaving me in the care of my grandmother. She was a kind soul who encouraged my love for reading and learning. However, she's no longer here, and I find myself alone in the world. No siblings, no close relatives, just me and my small world. Good morning, Helen. Mr. Jenkins, a regular visitor, greets me as he strolls in. He's an elderly man who spends his days immersed in history books. I reciprocate the greeting with a smile and inform him of the new shipment of history books that arrived yesterday. The day unfolds with familiar faces coming and going. I assist a group of kids in finding books for their school project. Recommend a romance novel to Mrs. Harrison, and guide Mr. Thompson to the science fiction section. It's a quiet life, but one that brings me comfort. Then, everything changes on the day Jack enters my life. He walks into the library looking for a book, but he doesn't fit the typical profile of a library visitor. His crisp suit and confident stride set him apart. "Can you help me find a book?" he asks, his voice smooth and inviting. "Of course. What are you looking for?" I reply, attempting to maintain composure. "It's a novel. The Great Gatsby, I believe," he says, and I lead him to the classics section. As I hand him the book, our hands brush briefly, sending a jolt through me. It's a simple touch, but it lingers in my mind. "Thank you, Helen," he says, reading my name tag. "I'm Jack. It's nice to meet you." This brief encounter marks the beginning of a profound change, a love I thought would last a lifetime and a journey that would take me from the quiet life I knew into a world of chaos and betrayal. Little did I know that life doesn't come with a warning label, and sometimes we just have to learn the hard way. Following that first meeting, Jack becomes a frequent visitor to the library. Despite not appearing to be the reading type, he consistently seeks book recommendations and engages in conversations with me. One day, as I struggle with a box of newly arrived books, he offers to help, and our interactions grow longer with each visit. I discovered that Jack was involved in his family's real estate business, and he proved to be easy to talk to. For the first time in a while, it felt like someone was genuinely interested in me. Then, one day, he surprised me with an invitation. "Helen, would you like to have dinner with me tonight?" His eyes held a hopeful expression. Taken aback, I asked, "Like a date?" He smiled and confirmed, "Yes, like a date." Despite the unfamiliar territory, there was something about him that made me want to say yes. "Okay, sure. I'd like that," I replied, attempting to keep my voice steady. We chose a cozy but not fancy restaurant in town. Over dinner, we talked about everything and nothing, and for a few hours, I forgot about my typically solitary life. Walking home, Jack expressed, "I had a really great time tonight, Helen. You're very different from the people I usually meet." Unsure of how to respond, I simply smiled. He continued, "I'd like to see you again. Would that be okay?" I nodded, "Yes, I'd like that." From then on, we started seeing each other more regularly, going out to dinner or taking walks. It felt nice to be part of something beyond books and quietness. Before long, I found myself falling hard for him. Jack was charming, attentive, and made me feel special. When he proposed, I didn't hesitate to say yes. Looking back, I wish I had seen the signs, known that his charm masked something less pleasant. Love has a way of blinding you, making you ignore warning signs. I was deeply in love, or at least I believed that I was. After Jack and I got engaged, things began to change. It started with his disapproving parents, who considered me beneath their son due to my lack of wealth. Meeting them at their opulent house for dinner was nerve-wracking. Margaret and Richard made it clear they didn't like me. questioning my suitability for Jack. Despite their disapproval, Jack stood up for me, strengthening my love for him. Before our wedding, his parents insisted on a prenuptial agreement, claiming it was a formality. With little to lose, I agreed without fuss. After marriage, I moved into Jack's house, a gift from his parents that they still treated as theirs. His parents frequented the house unannounced, issuing orders without hesitation. I refrained from causing trouble, silently enduring their constant reminders that nothing in the house was mine. Jack changed too, no longer the man I fell in love with. He began joining in on his parents' jokes at my expense, and one evening, I faced the dilemma of choosing an outfit for a family event and sought Jack's opinion. "This one makes you look less drab," he said, laughing. His words stung. It felt like he transformed into a different person around his parents. The support I once received had vanished. Instead, he joined in their laughter. Living in that house became exhausting, and I felt like an outsider, a guest unwelcome in my own home. Despite hoping for improvement, the situation only worsened. The stress took a toll on my health, resulting in severe stomach pains. Ignoring them proved futile, and one day I collapsed at the library. Waking up in the hospital, the doctor attributed it to stress, keeping me hospitalized for a few days. Jack neither visited nor called, leaving me feeling utterly alone. Unexpectedly, a notary arrived with life-changing news. My almost forgotten great-aunt had passed away, leaving me a fortune of $30 million. The sudden windfall transformed my status from the impoverished library girl to someone with significant wealth. When Jack and his parents learned of my inheritance, they visited, showering me with smiles and sweetness. "Darling, we're so happy for you," Margaret feigned concern. Richard chimed in, "We're a family. We should support each other." Skeptical of their sudden change, I'd overheard their conversation outside my room. Their true intentions became clear. They viewed me as a means to secure their financial future. Disturbed by their greed, I knew I had to escape their clutches and regain control of my life. Leaving the hospital, I returned home to find Jack and his parents waiting, playing the roles of a caring family. They expressed worry and curiosity about my inheritance. Jack, the man I thought I loved, had become unrecognizable. "When do you get the inheritance?" he asked eagerly. Realizing the depth of deception, I replied, "Soon, but it's not something you need to worry about." Jack, however, asserted the idea of marital entitlement. That night, haunted by their insincere concern and greed, I couldn't sleep. Fueled by years of frustration, I began documenting every detail of their actions and words. The next morning, armed with evidence, I met with a lawyer. Shocked by the situation, he assured me that the prenuptial agreement would protect my interests. Empowered by this revelation, I returned home to find Jack and his parents in the living room. "There she is, our brave girl," Richard greeted with a falsely warm smile. Clutching my purse, I gathered the courage to speak. "I have something to say," I announced, my voice unwavering. The room fell silent as I declared, "I'm filing for divorce." The shock rippled through the room, and Margaret erupted in anger, threatening legal action to claim a share of my inheritance. I delved into my purse and retrieved a copy of the prenuptial agreement. "Actually, you can't. This states that neither of us can claim the other's property in case of divorce," I calmly pointed out. For the first time, they were left speechless, and I seized control of the situation. Standing up, I declared, "I'm leaving. I don't want any of you to contact me." Walking out of that house, their shouts and insults trailed behind me. It was the most challenging thing I'd ever done, but as I drove away, a weight lifted off my shoulders. I felt free from their disdain and manipulation. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Despite uncertainties about the future, I rented a small apartment in the city. It wasn't extravagant, but it was mine. A sense of peace washed over me, and even though I was still dealing with the divorce, I felt equipped to handle it. One day, the lawyer called with information about my great-aunt's will. Intrigued, I inquired, "What about it?" He revealed a condition. I had to use a portion of my inheritance for a charitable cause, fulfilling my great-aunt's final wish. Surprised, I learned she was a philanthropist, and it felt like a sign pushing me in a new direction. I started researching charities and causes, seeking something meaningful. That's when I discovered a small organization aiding women victims of domestic abuse. Touched by their cause, I contacted them, met with Linda, and decided to fund a new shelter. A few weeks later, at the shelter's opening, the atmosphere buzzed with hope and gratitude. Among the attendees, I spotted a familiar face, Sarah, an old colleague from the library. Reconnecting with her felt like pieces of my life falling back into place. The days blended together as I immersed myself in the rewarding work at the shelter, finding a new sense of purpose. Unexpectedly, my phone rang, displaying a number I hadn't seen in a while. Jack. With a mix of emotions but curious, I answered. Hello, Jack. He urgently requested a meeting, claiming he made a huge mistake and wanted me back. Sitting across from him at a public coffee shop, he seemed different, defeated, and almost pitiful. Helen, I made a huge mistake. I want you back. I've realized how much you mean to me, he confessed. Looking at him, I felt nothing but contempt. Why now, Jack? His sigh revealed. My parents controlled everything. They were the reason our marriage failed. I was weak, but I'm different now. A surge of anger enveloped me. You blame your parents, but you stood by while they treated me like dirt. You laughed with them, Jack, I asserted. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Please, Helen, I know I was wrong. I've changed, he pleaded. Staring at him, I saw the man I once loved, but now I felt nothing for him. Changed or not, it's too late. I feel nothing for you, Jack, nothing but contempt. His face fell, and for a brief moment, I glimpsed the man I married, but it faded. I'm sorry, Jack, I've moved on. I have a life now, a purpose. There's no place for you in it, I said firmly. He nodded slowly, a look of resignation on his face. I understand. I just had to try. Leaving the coffee shop, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. It was truly over. The next day, an event took place at the shelter. A local artist had donated a sculpture to be unveiled in the garden. Surrounded by people who supported and believed in me, I felt a sense of belonging. Sarah, my old colleague from the library, stood beside me. You've done something amazing here, Helen, she said, smiling. The artist revealed the sculpture, a figure of a woman reaching up to the sky, symbolizing hope, strength, and new beginnings. Applause filled the air, and for a moment, everything felt right in the world. Linda, the woman who had helped me, approached. Helen, this is just the beginning. There's so much more we can do. Looking around at hopeful faces, I knew she was right. This was my new beginning, and I was ready to embrace it fully. My new life was busy and fulfilling. Each day at the shelter brought new challenges and rewards. My confidence grew, and for the first time in years, I felt in control of my destiny. I even started taking self-defense classes, something I never imagined doing before. One day, as I left the shelter, I saw a car parked outside. My mother-in-law, Margaret. Stepping out, she said, Helen, we need to talk. Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard. I have nothing to say to you, Margaret. I replied, my voice steady. Please just hear me out. I've realized how wrong we were, she pleaded. I stopped and looked at her. She seemed genuine, but I couldn't forget the past. What do you want, Margaret? I want to apologize. I treated you terribly. I've lost my son because of it, and I don't want to lose you too. You were like the daughter I never had, she said, her eyes glistening with tears. I felt a pang of sympathy, but I pushed it away. Margaret, you made my life a living hell. An apology won't change that. I've moved on, and I suggest you do the same, I said firmly. She reached out to me, but I stepped back. Please, Helen, I know I can't undo the past, but I want to make things right. I shook my head. It's too late for that. Goodbye, Margaret. As I walked away, I felt her gaze on my back, but I didn't look back. I had learned to stand up for myself, and there was no going back to the way things were. The next day, I received a letter from Jack's lawyer. He was contesting the divorce settlement. I wasn't surprised, but I was ready. Meeting with my lawyer, Rachel, she reassured me. He's got no leg to stand on, Helen. The prenuptial agreement is clear. He's just trying to intimidate you. I nodded. I'm not afraid of him anymore. Let's fight this. The court date arrived, and I walked in with my head held high. Jack was there with his lawyer, and for a moment, our eyes met. There was a flash of the old Jack, the one I had loved, but it vanished quickly. The judge listened to both sides and then made her decision. The prenuptial agreement stood, and Jack's claims were dismissed. I felt a surge of relief and triumph. After the court session, Jack approached me. Helen, I'm sorry. I was wrong, he said, his voice low. I looked at him, seeing the man I once loved, but now felt nothing for. Goodbye, Jack. Take care of yourself, I said and walked away. As I left the courtroom, I felt a sense of closure. That chapter of my life was finally over, and a new one was just beginning. At the shelter, we were planning a fundraiser, and it was taking all my attention. The support from the community was overwhelming, and I felt a deep sense of gratitude. The night of the fundraiser arrived, and the place was buzzing with energy. People from all walks of life had come to support our cause. As I looked around, I realized how far I had come, from a quiet, timid woman to someone who stood up for herself and others. Helen, you did it. This is amazing, Sarah said, coming up to me. I smiled. We did it. And there's so much more to do. As the event went on, I felt a sense of accomplishment and purpose. This was my life now, and I was exactly where I was meant to be.